Hi again. Today I'm gonna show you how to do fractions, and that's multiplication and dividing for grade 9. So two things to remember. Uh, remember reducing fractions, and then also determining your final sign. Is your answer gonna be negative or positive? So to find out if your final sign is going to be negative or positive, all you need to do, just count how many negatives you have in the question. When it's multiplication or division, it doesn't matter. So here we have 2, and 2 is an even number. So then I know my final answer will be positive. So if I have an even number of negative signs in the question, that's when I multiply or divide fractions, then I know my answer is positive. But if I have an odd number of negatives, then I know my final answer is going to be negative. So like here, 1, 2, 3, I know my final answer is going to be negative. Okay. So again, we know the final answer is positive here. So we'll ignore the negative signs. We'll just focus on the numbers. And this next thing is I want to reduce before I start writing my answer. Reducing, you look diagonally and see if you could reduce this way or this way. And obviously we cannot reduce because no number reduces into both numbers here. There's no common factor in any of these. But within here, this fraction right here, I could reduce this to, because everything divides by 3. So 9 divided by 3, I get 3. And 12 divided by 3, I get 4. Now I'm done. What I need to do next, I multiply the 5 into the 3 and I get 15. So I multiply tops together and I multiply bottoms together and I get 32 on the bottom. Again, we already determined our answer is going to be positive. Okay. The second question, we count how many negatives are in this question, and we have 3. So that's an odd number of negatives. That means if I have an odd number of negatives in the question, the answer is going to be negative. So I could put a negative there. Now I don't have to worry about my signs anymore. I try to reduce diagonally this way, nothing reduces. Diagonally this way, nothing reduces. Within the fraction, nothing reduces. Within this fraction, nothing reduces. So I'm only left with multiplying the top, which is 21, and 5 times 8 is 40, and that's my final answer. Yeah. I'm just going to change the color here to make it a little bit colorful. Maybe red. Yeah. So here, again, I count how many negatives I have. 1, 2, 3. So I know my final answer is going to be negative. And then I start looking at reducing. I know I have 3 fractions. You could reduce diagonally this way, or even diagonally this from here to here and from here to there. Yeah, so all are fine. So what I'm going to do, the first thing I see here, I see this 5 here divides into 1, and 25 divided by 5 is 5. The next thing is I'm still looking diagonally here, even though this reduced already, but this 5 and this 15, they go into each other. 5 goes into 15 3 times, it goes into 5 once, so that's done. Now I could look diagonally right here, and I know 6 goes into 36 6 times, and goes into 12 2 times. And maybe I'll look diagonally that way, and this 6 and this 6, they cancel each other out. So I get 1, 1. Nothing else reduces. I'm left with 1 times 2 times 1 on top, which gives me 2. And 1 times 3 times 1, which gives me 3. Okay, so again, always determine your sign first, so those signs are not confusing you anymore. So you know, because you have 3 negatives, which is an odd number of negatives, then the answer is going to be negative. Put a negative there and then ignore the signs. You don't even have to worry about them. In division, the first thing you need to do when you're dividing is to change the question to multiplication and flip the divisor, so that becomes 14 over -9 equals. Again, how many numbers of negative I have in the question is 1. That's an odd number of negatives, so my final answer is going to be negative. Diagonally, I could reduce, so 7 goes into itself once. It goes into 14 twice. 3 goes into itself once, and it goes into 9 3 times. Then I cannot reduce anymore. 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 3 is 3. That's my final answer. Again, with number 5, I'm just going to take this right there so it's not crowding. So I'm gonna change all division signs to multiplication, and then I'm gonna flip the divisor. So -4, -35 times 21 over 16 times 10 over 9. So we change all my division signs to multiplication, but I flip what I'm dividing by. My final answer is going to be definitely negative because I have 1, 2, 3 negatives, and that's an odd number of negatives. So if it's an odd number of negatives again, your final answer is going to be a negative. And then you could ignore those negative signs. Don't just assume they're not there anymore. And then diagonally, I could start reducing. What I see 4 goes into 16 4 times, goes into 24 6 times. I could even do more. 2 goes into 4 twice, goes into 6 3 times. 7 goes into 21 3 times, goes into 35 5 times. This 10 and this 5 was always diagonal. Anything from the top could reduce with anything from the bottom. So this 5 goes into itself once, goes into 10 twice. Now this is in the bottom, this is on top. I could also reduce them. 2 goes into itself once, it goes into itself once. Now I didn't see that 9, so again, we have this 3 goes into itself once, goes into this 9 3 times. This 3 goes into itself once and goes into this 3 once as well. And therefore I have 1, and on the bottom I have 1. So you'll have 1 over 1, but you don't have to write 1 over 1, just write 1 because every number has a 1 underneath that we don't write. Okay. Let's take the last question. And I'm just gonna change the color again, maybe to blue. I have to change this question to 18 over 5 times. I have to flip this. Since I changed it to multiplication, we know there's a 1 underneath there. So I'm just gonna change it to 1 over -3. And you don't really need that brackets. If you wanna write it, that's fine. If you don't choose to write it, that's fine as well. And I choose not to write it. Times, I'm gonna flip that to 2/3. Again, the number of negative signs here is 1, and that's an odd number of negatives, so my final answer is gonna be negative. I'm gonna start reducing. 3 goes into itself once, goes into 18 6 times. 3 goes into itself once, it goes into 6 twice. Nothing reduces anymore from the top and the bottom. So now I have -4 over 5 as a final answer. So we just multiply the tops together, and 5 times 1 times 1 is giving me 5. I hope this helps grade 9ers solve questions like this. I think what I noticed from my experience teaching, always students confuse the sign. So here is a little trick that you could use. Just count the number of negatives you have in the question. If it's an odd number of negatives, your final answer is negative. If it's an even number of negatives, then your final answer is positive. I hope you like this. wait for my next postings on YouTube. Till then, have a great week. Bye-bye.